morning. I'm with Geoffrey Moore. Jeff, I don't know how you prefer to be introduced, author, technology and business visionary. All I can say is that the titles of your books are almost a matter of cultural legacy, not in recognizing a phrase like, crossing the chasm, or not recognizing a phrase like in the zone kind of, brands you as really not maybe needing to be at the grown-ups table in business, and to have helped to create the language in which we discuss strategy and entrepreneurship is an extraordinary contribution. And having you as our keynote at Forum several years ago was certainly as high a point as we've ever had. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be. I mean, the whole PACT community is a community that I've been living with for 35 years. It's sure. The entrepreneurs and the venture capitalists and the academics and whatnot. And so it makes me very happy to be able to have another chance to share some ideas with you and have a conversation with you.
Well, I'm struck by the fact that we had you with us 3 years ago, because one of the thought experiments I like to offer to people when they're on the cusp of strategic decisions is, I want you to imagine there's a letter in your inbox. It's from yourself, dated 3 years from today. Do you look forward to opening it because you know your future self will congratulate you on the guts and vision that you showed? Or are you dreading the prospect of your future self saying to you, you really dropped this ball, you didn't step up when you should have? And I'm wondering, what would you have said to yourself 3 years ago if you'd known what you know now? Are there things you would have said then that, based on, if you'd known then what you know now? And if we had you on stage this year, on a physical stage, are there things you would say, here are the things I got right, here are the things I wish I'd had a chance to warn you were coming, or to frame in a different way?
Well, we sure didn't see COVID coming, did we? My first thought, when you said we're talking about getting a letter from my future self 3 years from now, is, am I having a COVID hallucination? but I think the issue of so I've been on a path of sorts for quite a while. I think that from crossing the chasm through the last book, Zone to Win, it's been a series of trying to tackle tough problems that my client base and my community are facing, and try to bring frameworks to bear on them. Uh-huh. And so each book was kind of an example of trying to staple yourself to a challenge that I didn't know the answer to, and then just kind of work through it till we got to something good. So I think if I look back 3 years from now, I'm very happy that, because I didn't intend to write the last book, Zone to Win, but Mark Benioff, as you know, is a persuasive guy, and he got me involved in that, and I did it, and it's been I would give myself a plus on that one. Way to go, Jeff! You let Mark lead you. In terms of something that I'm thinking, wow, is there something he didn't get right? I think, like many of us, I just took for granted that this sort of steady kind of improvement in normality was something that was an entitlement. And what COVID has taught me, if nothing else, is, boy, do you have to rethink that and say, look, this is a mortal game. We're playing within time limits, and you are not entitled. You're blessed. If you're, and then you have to sort of reframe a little bit around that. So I would say that the reframing is something I'm learning now.
Well, when you bring up just now the idea that you can't assume that things will just get monotonically better all the time. That, in fact, I think is the core of your argument about Jcurves versus S-curves, that there are cultures and communities in which there's an understanding. You yourself used a Dante reference. You said you have to go through inferno to go through purgatory to get to paradise. And that there are cultures in which they don't want to do that. They want to say, no. I want to jump on the S-curve at just the right point, and then jump to the next S-curve at just the right point. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that maybe 3 years ago, people might have deluded themselves that was a possibility. And now we realize, there are purgatories.
Yeah, there's a guy named Stephen Gould who had he had a philosophy about evolution called punctuated equilibrium.
Yes.
And the idea was, it's steady as you go, steady as you go, steady as you go, woof.
Yes.
And so in the steady as you go period, it's, that monotonic thing, it's what you're experiencing over a significant period of time.
Yes.
And you learn management methods that are designed to have inertial momentum and kind of stay the course and don't vary too far one way or the other, and incremental innovation, evolution, not revolution, all those things. But then periodically, and of course in tech, much more frequently than elsewhere,
yes,
we have these disruptive moments, which is like, no, it's mobile. No, it's cloud. No, it's whatever. And of course, with COVID, no, it's COVID. And as you say, I mean, COVID is a great example of our country right now. There's a huge segment of the population that wants to deny the Jcurve.
yeah.
It wants to say, no, I won't accept it. So I think the Jcurve is daunting. Nobody likes it. Right? It's daunting. I think the key to it, and what we saw with the entrepreneurs that was so impressive, is once you're into a Jcurve, there's only one way out. You have to go through it. Mm-hmm. You cannot retreat.
Yeah.
And when you retreat and pull back, usually in the short term, you can pull back to someplace, but then you're even more marginalized. The next time you have to go forward.
Yes.
And then eventually you pull yourself out of the game entirely. As you know, there are dozens and dozens of tech icons that don't exist anymore.
Yes.
Because they couldn't do that.
And the churn in the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 list is something that people point out from time to time. Do you realize how few companies that were there 20 years ago, 30 years ago are still there now?
And the thing that's so important about that is the Fortune 500 rewards management because these are large companies with an enormous amount of inertial momentum and lots of reasons to manage things kind of in an evolutionary way. But they're very challenged when they have to deal with disruptive innovation.
Jeff, one of the things that we try to identify at Forum each year, if we can, is what are the things that are on the cusp of emerging from research or lab or startup to really become something you could build a business on. And you've already talked about one biological metaphor of punctuated equilibrium. And of course, a related one is the Cambrian Explosion, where over a remarkably short period of time, a huge number of new species emerged. And I think we've seen a Cambrian explosion in the mobility space enabled by platforms like iOS and Android, where maybe we're looking now at another such explosion of personal medical technology driven by the demands of things like contact tracing and so on. And I wonder, do you yourself have any suggestions as to what might be the thing we'll remember 2020 as having been the pivotal moment when this exploded out and suddenly became something everyone should be investing in and building upon?
I think there's an Uber theme that you could hang many of these things from, which we've been calling digital transformation. Everybody's been calling it digital transformation forever, right? But the concept there is, once you understand the ubiquity of compute capability, then you have to realize sooner or later, every single process in the world will be digitally transformed. It has to be, because so the real question is not if, but when. And that's, of course, that's the tricky question for venture capitalists, because there are a lot of people and entrepreneurs that are either 10 years too early or 3 years too late.
Oh yeah,
they're getting the timing just right. I think right now, what I try to suggest is look for the places of trapped value where intervening there would make the biggest difference now. So I think healthcare is a good example. I think healthcare has got an enormous amount of trapped value, meaning the systems are spectacularly inefficient compared to what they could be. And digital transformation can make a dramatic difference, as we're already seeing. But finding those pockets of trapped value, sometimes, like, who knew that our cars were a source of trapped value until Travis did Uber, right? And all of a sudden you realize, whoa, there's this entire resource we're not using, Airbnb. Well, who knew all our bedrooms were a trapped value resource, right?
Yes.
Some of them come sort of from left field, but some of them are like problematic situations. I think higher education's in line somewhere here pretty quick.
Yes.
I think legal services will be, but I think that'll be much later, frankly.
It's interesting you talked about Uber, Airbnb, and I've observed many times Uber did not invent a faster car, train a better driver, or discover secret maps of the fastest routes around town. But what they did was grow a new cerebral cortex on top of a fairly sturdy beast, namely cars and drivers and road. But then it grew an ability to think that created a new experience wrapped around it. And I wonder, is that the key, is to look at something that's a good sturdy beast of burden that's just not very smart, and then say, not how do we do that thing digitally, but how do we add an intelligence layer to it that suddenly explodes its value into an experience that makes people say, oh, this is what this was always meant to be.
Yeah, or at least this is what it can be now. It's if you think about why did Uber take off really? Well, part of it was, you and I have waited for taxi cabs in cities around the world.
Yes, absolutely.
And felt as powerless as we've ever felt.
Yeah.
And then so that one was sort of like, there was a huge demand for that thing. But to be fair, it happened spontaneously. That started as a ride-sharing program to get over the Bay Bridge. I mean, it was literally...
Didn't they originally launch as a limo service aimed at a much higher-end market, and then suddenly occurred to them this could be democratized?
That may be. I didn't know that part of the story, but those ideas then of saying, how could you think that? I mean, it's back to Steve Jobs saying, think different, right?
Yes.
But you're saying actually add another layer of the cerebral cortex. I think what happens is each generation of technology frees you from the past, but also then limits your future. And so it's like client-server computing, right? Mm-hmm. With a huge liberation from mainframes, but then SaaS was a huge liberation from client-server, and then mobile was a huge liberation from that. So, I think that's what happens.
So there's never, we've already been talking about Dante, but to move to a different field of study, there's never actually a nirvana.
That's right. Yeah, I've got a philosophy book actually coming out next year. It's called An Infinite Staircase. And basically the idea is there's no top and no bottom. They're just stairs.
I remember, I think it was Philippe Kahn once saying, quoting the Zen master when someone said, well, it's on the back of the turtle and that's on the back of the greater turtle and it's the back of the greater turtle. And he said, son, you're wasting your time. It's turtles all the way down. Exactly. But you're saying we really ought to be looking upward and say, there's always another layer that can be added above what we are. And that's such an interesting point because so many people talk about digital transformation as if it's looking at what you've got and doing that digitally. That is not the same thing as looking at what you're not doing because you didn't have the bandwidth, you didn't have the processing power, you didn't have the software tools, saying, wait a minute, what's the layer of intellect and experience that can now be added that was really not feasible to contemplate before?
Right. And I think what happens with new technologies is the first generation often is used to repave the goat paths,
yes.
because by the way, it does help. I mean,
yes.
it does make them better.
Yep.
But then a new mind comes along and goes, well, wait a minute, this is silly. And that's what makes entrepreneurs so wonderful.
Yeah, that's what Peter Drucker, trying to be more dignified, called recognizing the incongruity.
Yes, okay. This is silly works for me.
But this is just silly is a good way.
Well, the one that I'm still laughing about today because it's still not ubiquitous is digital signatures, DocuSign, and stuff like that.
Yes.
Every time somebody says I need to have you, I'm going to fax you a letter. I want you to sign it, scan it, and send it back to me. I'm thinking this is silly.
We were just talking about that the other day in the space of healthcare, where the fax machine lives because the handwritten prescription note and things like this, and there are still these pockets.
I just think there's so much trapped value in healthcare right now. Part of the challenge is we do need to go from a fee-for-service to a capitated model.
Yes.
We started down that path. We've kind of blocked that path for the current administration. I hope we get back on the path soon, because that creates the economic force that says, well, we have to become more efficient because now it's our money we're losing. And we're now spending our money instead of the patient's money, or the government's money.
Yeah.
And so I think, and it will. I mean, the opportunities are legion. But it's interesting. Another thing you can look for as an entrepreneur are situations where a profession or a portion of the economy is governed by a caste. So, there's a caste of doctors, there's a caste of university professors, there's a caste of lawyers. When you have those situations, the self-interest of the caste creates trapped value. And at some point, there's just too much trapped value, and you've got to break through.
Okay, so it's like when you pull quarks apart, at some point you put so much energy into the system that a neutron just suddenly appears.
But it's like I remember that Ronald Reagan was not, I was a liberal, so Ronald Reagan wasn't my president, but remember when the air traffic controllers?
Yes, I do.
So it was like they were trapping the value, and they got broken apart. It was interesting to watch that.
And the opportunity to see that moment and say, wait a minute, this is now possible. And so this thing we've been tolerating as, whether you call it tradition or legacy or institutional memory or whatever, you say, wait a minute, there is a crack here that a wedge can now be driven into.
And I think higher education's next. I think it's pretty clear that the value you get from higher education compared to the dollars you spend is not a good value.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse during most of my lifetime. And now with this with the COVID crisis and seeing what we can do digitally, it's obvious that people are going to go, look, I'm not trying to get rid of everything, but there's a hybrid model here that's going to be a lot better than what we have today.
Jeff, we talked briefly about healthcare. One of the on-ramps that I've wondered for a while is, did we have fee for service because we could measure pills and we could measure procedures and we could measure minutes of office visit, but measuring the outcome, well, the outcome took place at another time in another place. And now I wonder if, now that we can measure the outcome off the thing on your wrist or the instrumentation in your house, if that is in fact the door through which we can walk to say, hey, now we can measure wellness and be paid for the result instead of being paid for the effort. And I wonder if you see any other doorways like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key to the doorway. I think there are two keys to the doorways. I think there's an insurance key which says if you can accumulate enough of a population, you can use the statistics of the population to sort of protect you economically. Yes. And we couldn't do that. Historically, remember, the doctor just showed up and gave you their time and expertise, and they had to get paid. And the guy that made the surgical instrument had to get paid. And there was no way to collect that except maybe under a Medicare, Medicaid type of thing.
Yes.
I'm hoping that the problem. I mean, you say, well, that seems like a better system, except when you talk to anybody from socialized medicine, you realize, well, it's not wonderful.
Calling the implementation.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that what we do in our country is something really original, because we're pretty good at doing things originally now and again.
I can't remember who it was who said that our system is the worst except for all the others.
Exactly.
Disraeli or Churchill are one of those clever people.
Exactly.
Jeff, in one of your book pages on Amazon, it refers to a Conan O'Brien quote where he once asked, who is Geoffrey Moore and why is he more famous than I am? Now, at the beginning, you alluded to the notion that what you seek to do is give people frameworks. You seek to give them a skeleton on which they can hang things and suddenly see how it all relates to each other. And you've developed some amazing frameworks. I mean, helping people look at something and see a Jcurve and recognize what that represents. Are there any things that you've found particularly novel, or for that matter, the things that you wish people would listen to what you were saying 10 years ago because you meant it then and it's still true?
Well, it is. I mean, I think the core of my work it goes back to the technology adoption lifecycle, and this notion that any disruptive innovation will go through a series of stages of acceptance or adoption. And each gate to each stage is a different persona. That's kind of the gatekeeper.
Okay.
Stage. And so that is still the most important lesson for anybody in tech to get. So there's this early group of people who believe what you believe, and that's the first group, and you start the fire with them, and it's a kumbaya moment, and everything is possible. It's wonderful. And then this chasm was due to the fact that the second gatekeeper is somebody who says, I won't do this until everybody else is doing it too. Okay. And of course, that's not happened yet. So the crossing the chasm problem was to find, we call this other group, the second group, pragmatists, but there was a subset of them we called pragmatists in pain. And pragmatists in pain were willing to adopt novel solutions because they couldn't solve them with their conventional ones, and they were desperate. And so the notion that the entrepreneur had to go from being the computer for everyone, this is Steve Jobs in 1985 with Macintosh, to desktop publishing, which is like drove Jobs nuts because I didn't build a computer for graphic artists and corporations. Yeah. but that was that second group. And they were the gatekeepers. Then the third group are the people who go, oh, I want one of those. I want an iPhone. I want Wi-Fi. I want the laser printer. I want whatever it is. Those are the pragmatists moving as a herd, and that's when all the great fortunes are created. That's when that's the massive adoptions that create the Googles and the Amazons and the Airbnbs and all that stuff. And then the fourth group, who we always ignore, we call them the conservatives, because in tech, they never liked our stuff. They always thought we were snake oil salesmen, and many times they were right. But in SaaS, in the new as a service model, they're your install base. That's the attrition. That's the churn. If you can't win the conservatives' loyalty, the business model doesn't work. And so one of the interesting things about this decade is watching how much user experience, customer experience, all that stuff has become important, because in a subscription model, you've got to maintain the relationship.
Yes. What I do think I hear you saying is that it's fine to be driven by a vision, but have some peripheral vision and realize that going straight for the thing that your vision compels you to do may be the most difficult path, and that going through what looks like a digression like desktop publishing, or leaving the idea of everyone becomes a programmer to say, well, okay, maybe we'll have spreadsheets as well as programming languages over on the PC side. I'm thinking this is getting very I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, which is kind of a dated but being prepared to accept the idea that there will be side trips that will build the base you need to have the market size that attracts the collaborators you require to realize the vision you had in the first place.
It's a little bit like winning the primaries in order to get the nomination.
Very good.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, and the entrepreneur sees the presidency, right? They just want to go straight to the presidency, right? Yeah. It's like, well, okay, but come on, there's a process.
Fantastic. Jeff, it's been extraordinary to have this chance to revisit with you as a friend of PACT from many years standing, and to get this update from you. These are such interesting times, the metaphor of a crucible into which there are so many interesting ingredients, and to see what alloy of technology, society, education, health, and other practices will emerge is wonderful. I'm sure it keeps you up early and reading and working every night.
Fully engaged.
I'm Peter Coffey on behalf of Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies. I'm talking with Geoffrey Moore. Thank you all for being part of this year's Reimagined Forum. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks, Peter.
Hi, everyone. The beauty of taking Forum to a virtual platform allows us to not only showcase the companies selected to present in our Demo Pit series, but it also allows us an opportunity to get to know the folks behind the technology and services of each of these uniquely inspired companies.
Today, we'll introduce you to the people behind our 8 Demo Pit companies. Let's take a look.
I'm Steve Liu, founder and CEO of Interstellar. What makes me really tick is just kind of like building a kind of like company that is kind of like the anti-company in a way, where we do things a lot differently. What makes me tick is I really like Interstellar being that hopefully I build a name brand in recruiting. That's basically what I want to kind of accomplish, not monetarily driven or anything like that. But what really I want to build is, recruiters recognize Interstellar as the brand to go to, similar to how salespeople recognize Salesforce as that brand.
Hi, my name is Joe Ujjabi, and I'm the founder of the Alternative Investment Exchange, otherwise known as AIX. I like to fix things. I like to build teams. I like to bring out the best in people.
I'm Chris Corsi, CEO of Cassian Solutions. I'm from West Effort, New Jersey, about 15 minutes outside of Center City, Philadelphia. And I actually, when I was going to college, I knew that I wanted to get into the business world, but specifically in the technology space. So I was looking for a college that had a good technology background, and happened to be the University of Pittsburgh. And that's where I met my 2 other co-founders, Edwin and Colin. From there, we got into the pharma space as Colin's a pharmacist, and we really wanted to bring the company back to Philadelphia primarily because we knew Pharmacy Row was sort of right up the New Jersey and Delaware line. Plus, Colin and I are both from the Philadelphia region, so we both wanted to come back home.
Hi, I'm Grace G, and I'm a co-founder of Polestar. So my entire career and my entire approach to life is not very linear. And one of the things I do is incessantly ask questions. And I think that's not something that comes naturally to a lot of people. And it's because by asking endless questions, I'm able to find out the answers that I even want to look for and figure out an approach to solve problems, improve processes, grow businesses.
I am Dan Lamott, co-founder and CEO of Threshold.world. So I grew up in a small town in Southern California called Ventura, which is on the coast just between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. And I came to the Philadelphia area for the first time in 1994 to go to school at Villanova University. Finished my undergrad there and met the love of my life and traveled around for a bunch of years and then came back to Philly about 8 years ago.
My name is Sanjay Khobragade, and I'm the founder and CEO of NeuroHealth. Actually born and brought up in India, but then I came for master's to Villanova. And since then I have been resident of, Philadelphia and suburb. I worked here, I got married, I'm raising my family. So now, I'm part of the Philly and love Eagles as well. So when I came to US, I didn't know anything about football, but now I'm a big fan of Eagles as well.
I'm Sean Boyce, the CEO of StaffGeek.
I'm Mark Prine, Chief Science Officer of StaffGeek.
So I'm from Philadelphia originally, and I studied engineering at Drexel University. And I decided to remain in Philly to run StaffGeek for its excellent startup tech community.
And I'm actually originally from New Jersey, closer to New York. Came down here to study at Temple University for my undergraduate, stayed in the area and did my master's at Westchester, and stayed in the Philly area because I love the people, I love the city, and I love the grittiness.
Hello, my name is Joe Rochar, and I am founder and CEO of Ipaka, doing business as Ike. I was born in Minneapolis, but I've lived all over. 6 years in Dallas, 5 years in Japan, Georgia, South Carolina, Washington State, many of these during my active duty. I love it here in Philadelphia. The rich diversity and the deep history make this place vibrant, and I'm really thriving here. Besides all that, I'm an outdoorsman and a musician and an avid reader, and especially in history. And the history of this place is just amazing.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Look forward to seeing you back in Philadelphia soon at Forum Reimagined. I'm going to go check the waves.
Make sure to tune in to our Forum Keynote series in October for our Demo Pit company pitches. To learn more about these companies, you can log into the Forum mobile app or desktop platform
and visit their company profiles. If you haven't already downloaded the app, hold your smartphone camera up to this QR code or search for PAC events in our App Store. Once downloaded, join the Forum community within the app using the code 20Forum20.